My name's Janelle Gardner. I'm Port Stephens Council's Communications Manager. My role tonight is just to guide you through this program, help with answering any of the questions and direct those questions to the right people on the Zoom. Just to let you know, we're recording tonight's session. So we'll be recording this session so we can share it online and let others see it. We have 2 more of these Zoom sessions coming up. So people that aren't here tonight can also, if you've got friends and family that would like to find out more, then welcome to join any of the other sessions. One thing I would like to tell you is we do have what's called Menti, which is a polling program we're using. So there's a code in the chat that you can pick up and you just type that into your browser and it asks you to tell us just a quick survey. It's like a pre-poll and an exit poll to tell us how you felt about the information before you got here and how you felt about the information after you've heard the session. All that's doing is help us improve these sessions as we go along. So any feedback you could give us, that would be great. So we'll get started tonight. I'll introduce you to our Acting Group Manager, Tim Crosdale, and he'll start the session from here on in.
Thanks, Janelle. Afternoon, everyone who could make it. My name's Tim Crosdale, I'm Acting General Manager here at Port Stephens Council. Really appreciate you making the time to join us. What I want to do is just quickly introduce who is here from Council who'll be talking to you tonight, and also go through some of the, I guess, the housekeeping around how we would like to be able to interact with you in this online environment. So first of all, we have Zoe Patterson, who is our Acting Corporate Services Group Manager.
Hi.
Stephen Pert, who is our Group Manager of Development Services. We also have Greg Cable, who's our Group Manager of Facility and Services, and we have Tim Hazel, our Chief Financial Officer, who will be running through quite a bit of detail and presentation with you very, very shortly. You'll start to see our faces around with regards to this engagement process that we have commenced, both in face-to-face opportunities and also these online sessions. As Janelle said, we are recording this event, so we were able then to share it on the web and share it out further to those that haven't been able to make it. As we do, we will start off with an acknowledgement of country. So in that regard, I'd like to acknowledge that today we may be meeting on many Aboriginal lands and the Worimi as the original custodians and inhabitants of Port Stephens. May we walk the road to tomorrow with mutual respect and admiration as we care for the beautiful land and waterways together. Just before we start the presentation, given we are online, what we would encourage people to do, if you do have questions as we go through the detail, more than happy to stop at that point and answer those questions. We just ask that you use hand function. Hopefully everyone is aware of how to do that on Zoom, but simply if you have a question, please raise your hand. Alternatively, more than happy for you to be able to put that into the chat function as well. If you think of something, please put it in there. We'll either be able to stop on the way through, or once we've finished the presentation, we can then open that up and be able to work through those questions as they come forward. And we might get a few more as more people join us. For now, I do want to welcome Tim Hazel to the microphone, as it were, to be able to run through a presentation about our funded future. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. It sounds like a bit of an echo when you've got 2 Tims in the same team providing all of this. We've got quite a few slides to go through this evening. It's the sort of standard presentation that we've been giving over the last few days. I understand that it is a fair bit of information. I'll try and take it slowly and certainly get back to basics in terms of trying to explain where we've come from and where we're in fact going. We've broken the presentation down into a discussion about the journey so far. Where's Council been and how did we get to where we were? What's the next 10 years looking like for us in terms of financial forecast? What have we been doing over the last few years? What are the options going forward in terms of funding the future as our funded future tagline that we've got around this program? We'll need to have a conversation about special rate variation options, and there are 5 that I'd like to take you through in some detail. Understand that we're about putting options out there for for a conversation with the community. There's been no decision at this point as to whether a special rate is or isn't an option for us to pursue. It's about having the conversation. And then briefly, how can you have your say and what are the next steps? So moving into the journey so far, and it's a little difficult trying to do it in an electronic version and across the Zoom platform, but we start from the left-hand side of the graph that we've put up on the screen, and you can see that in 2009, Port Stephens Council was running at an operating deficit of $13.4 million, and it was time to obviously have a very serious consideration of where were we, what were we trying to do, because those sort of levels of operating deficits could not be sustained. Briefly defined, we were spending more money than what we were getting in. So we've gone through, or the organisation went through, a rigorous program of looking at the business, looking at the services that were provided, benchmarking those services to make sure that they were relevant and valued from a community's perspective. And obviously we've been able to, I think, improve the situation for the first couple of years into 2013, when we were able to hit our first surplus for a number of years. We're able to maintain a very small surplus. Our metric, or our objective through all of that period of time, was a 1% or break even from our budget. We're $120 odd million worth of organisation, so a 1% is a very small margin, translates to about $1 million in broad terms, in terms of being able to meet or have a contingency, if you like, should things not pan out as we would like. 2013, we obviously introduced a fairly rigid budget culture into the organisation, and you can see the years 2013 through to 2019, we were achieving that level 1 metric, or that 1% of our budget surplus. 2020 came along and COVID-19 pandemic hit. State mandated lockdowns obviously had a rather severe impact on our business, as it did across the economy generally. We had things like our holiday parks closed down for a period of time. Obviously, the airport, of which we were a co-owner, wasn't able to have any flights coming in or out. So the dividends that we had previously enjoyed from the airport and the returns that we had from our holiday park appeared overnight. Obviously, we were therefore faced with some very difficult decisions at that point in time. The organisation took the opportunity, and I don't know whether we took the opportunity or it was obviously forced upon us, to tighten our belts, to have a look at our discretionary spend, and basically put off anything that we possibly could to try and get us back to that break even, at bare minimum, or a 1% as the aspirational area. We weren't quite able to do it in 2020. We achieved it in 21, and in 22 we were looking, or are looking, like it was $1 million deficit. Now we hope to turn that around and be able to report something a little bit better in that space. While you're running very small margins, it's easy to see that if we do have the hit, as we did in terms of big ticket items, airport dividend was $2 million, so you take $2 million out of the organisation. Holiday parks is a similar sort of profit margin. So if you take those results out of the organisation, running those small margins, it's very difficult to maintain a surplus or a resilience level. We've done a lot of things. As I said, we curbed our discretionary spend. We looked at our recruitment policies or our recruitment practices, and we put a lot of those off if that could be possibly done. We basically came back to looking at critical levels of expenditure, so only doing that which is absolutely necessary. I think it's fair to say that we've probably seen a little bit of a deterioration in terms of service levels. out into the community, and we're seeing a little bit of that coming back in the terms that we're not able to maintain the assets to the levels that we previously were able to enjoy. So that's the history of the place or the organisation for the last 12, 13 years, and a bit of a background to how we got to where we are now. Looking forward, in terms of putting our planning or our long-term financial planning together for the current year, we always knew that 2022 would be a difficult year financially. We had a number of costs that were coming through in terms of increased superannuation guarantee levies or whatever the new equivalent of that is, that was mandated. We knew that there were increasing cost pressures coming into the organisation, so it was always going to be difficult from 2022 going forward. To exacerbate all of that, we've got a rate capping legislation or a rate capping mandate from the state government that says we can only raise our rates by 2.5%. So our ability to increase revenue into the organisation is somewhat limited. On the right-hand side of the graph, you can see that the inflation rate or consumer price index currently at 5.1%, or it certainly was yesterday. I'm hearing this morning that it's gone up to 6.2, so the figures aren't getting any better for each and every day that goes by. And it shows that we can forecast a deteriorating financial position for this organisation over the next 10 years. You add all of those together, it's looking like a figure or a shortfall, if you like, of $80 million over that period of time. So that's going to have some obvious ramifications if we continue down this particular path, and it'll cut into a lot of areas of services that are provided. We're already hearing, and you don't need to be terribly knowledgeable to hear difficulties about potholes, difficulties about other levels of maintenance. To reduce your levels of maintenance is a very short-term and a very narrow-sighted approach, and is something that can't be sustained in the long term. Hence, the reason that we're out talking with people, talking with the community about our financial sustainability and where we're going. What have we been doing? We've been doing quite a few things. I've talked about discretionary spend already, that we've really pared that back. We've got a 10% increase in our fees and charges for the current year. That's been factored in, where normally we would increase our fees and charges by around about 2-3%. This time we've taken a leap and put those up by 10%. A limited approach, but nonetheless, it's part of the solution going forward. Additional paid parking, particularly on the peninsula, Berrubi, Fingal, Shoal Bay, 1 Mile, and some extra parking around Little Beach have been factored into the projections. So we'll be moving ahead with the implementation of those paid parking regimes in those areas fairly shortly. We've looked at our loan portfolio, the loans that we have from external bodies, and we've been able to lock those in and to enjoy the record low interest rates. Very quickly, we were able to lock in around about 2%. The latest interest rate that we're able to borrow at is 5 or 6%. So it was rather fortuitous that we took that decision a few months ago. We've also identified a number of parcels of surplus land, and currently we're going through a very extensive conversation with the council on what those parcels of land look like, what the process is to be potentially offload or put onto the market those parcels of land, understanding that there's a lot of work in that particular line item, and it's going to take a number of years to fully realise the sale of the land. That said, doesn't really help in terms of the operational issues for the organisation, but it may be able to provide us with some sort of resilience funding, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Deferred a number of projects, and certainly we've deferred any more new debt for any of those particular projects. So we've really cut back in both of those areas. Late last year, we were concerned, particularly coming out of the COVID-19 and the lockdowns, as to the overall sustainability of the organisation, where we were heading, and we felt the need to be able to benchmark that back to the local government industry in New South Wales. And we asked Professor Brian Dollery and Professor Joseph Drew to come in and provide some assistance in that regard. Brian and Joseph have been doing a lot of work in local government in terms of academic assessments of financial sustainability for one. They've also helped a number of councils realise where they are and provide an independent review of the financial sustainability of each of those councils. We saw a lot of their work in previous months, so we felt that it was appropriate, given the pressures or the likelihood of the pressures that we thought were coming in front of us, to get them in and to basically get an independent academic run over our forward projections to make sure that we were catering for everything, the fact that we were talking about the right sort of things at the right time. Those reports are available on our website, and there's around about 158 pages worth of sometimes rather ominous reading. Overall finding was that Port Stephens Council is not financially sustainable. You saw that in the previous slide, obviously, with money coming in that's capped at a 2.5%, as opposed to money going out that's anywhere at 5 or 6%. Of course, we're not going to be sustainable in those sorts of economic pressures. Understand, of course, that we're not alone in this particular journey. It's the same pressures that every business is operating under at this point in time: increasing costs, difficulty in terms of revenues, and it's the same as every household, that the cost of living for particular essential criteria is going up and up, or it seems to be going up and up each day, and yet our wages are capped to levels that are quite a deal lower than that. So we're no different to anybody else in that regard, in terms of individuals, households, or businesses. Hence the reason that we're trying to put it there and have a mature conversation with the community on where we are, where we need to go, and certainly what can we do about the situation that we're all in. That said, there are a number of areas that will form part of our approach to how we go forward from here. We can look at fees and charges. I've already said that we've increased it for the current year by 10%. We can do that again. That is around about a $400,000 per year result coming back into the organisation. A big number in one way, but certainly nowhere near the 80 million that we're looking at. We can look at our fees and charges. We can remove the residential parking exemption, and when I say we can, I'm talking about council. It'll need a resolution. It won't be left up to people like myself or the executive that are here. It will be a council resolution. It's running, or our estimates on the income that would be raised if we did that is $1 million per year. So over 10 years, it's potentially a $10 million decision that needs to be made. I know at this stage from some of the Facebook posts I'm seeing that that's not a particularly preferred option in some areas of our community. Nonetheless, it could be part of the solutions, and we need to have that conversation, and we need to hear that feedback from the community. We can continue our efforts for grant funding, and that will obviously continue on. We have a grants officer here dedicated to searching for grants for us as an organisation. Typically, grant funds are used for the new shiny stuff, and we can go through a number of the big projects that have been done in recent times. And typically you'll find that most of that came from grant funding that's coming out of federal or state government. a lot more coming through the resilience funding and the need to stimulate the economy that was coming out of the federal government in recent times. So we would imagine that that's probably going to continue for some time, and we'd take advantage of that. That said, it looks a bit funny when we're out building all new shiny things and a new amenities building goes up on this particular park or that style or another sporting complex, or those sorts of things happen, and it sends or has sent some mixed messages that it appears as if council is well cashed up, if you like. As I said, typically coming out of grant funds, so it's not our money, it is for new and shiny things. While on one hand, yes, there are the grants and we enjoy those and we accept all of those. And on the other hand, we've got difficulties in our day-to-day operating sphere. So a little bit of a conundrum or a little bit of difficulty in trying to get our head around that. But I'd ask people just to be considerate of the fact that the new shiny things generally means it's somebody else's money that we're spending on their behalf. We can also sell underperforming assets. I've just talked a little bit about all of that. Early indications, we could get around about $5 million in that particular program. It's going to take some time to be able to realise that. Again, doesn't really help in terms of your operating. You don't sell the farm to pay for your dinner. Those sorts of analogies have been used in many spheres in the past, but it could help in perhaps in providing a fund for resilience or a one-off road program of something of that particular nature. So yes, again, it's part of the package of what we're going out to discuss with the community, and will be part of the package of what we put together to look at this organisation. Finally, should all of that fail, or should all of that not reach the levels that we anticipate, we're going to have a conversation about reducing service levels. We had a session this morning and people wanted to know what sort of service levels we would be reducing and just what cuts that we could expect. It's part of the next raft of conversations. Should everything else be exhausted and we don't get to the levels, the 80 million that we're talking about, then we're obviously going to have that service level consideration. Things like reducing maintenance, and I don't know that there'd be anyone would support taking money out of the current pothole maintenance boat or anything like that. Perhaps reducing the hours of operations of some of our areas. All very difficult conversations to have, and all very difficult options to be putting in front of anyone to consider. So that's really a method of last resort, if you would like. We're certainly hoping that the things that we've mentioned earlier can come to fruition. We don't really need to get into that level of conversation. That said, it leads us to the other conversation and the rather nasty word, special rate variation. I know we went out a few years ago. We weren't successful in that time frame. Special rate variation has all sorts of connotations, and I've heard a lot of those come back up. But we need to have the conversation. It can provide, as you'll see when we get to the options, it can provide part of the solution. So it needs to be a conversation, and we need to talk about the options that we're putting forward or could potentially put forward for IPART to consider. The advantages of a special rate variation: it's permanent, so it's a financial restructure of the organisation, if you like. The rate pie, in simple terms, gets bigger, and with a bigger pie, you can obviously do more. There's certainty attached to it, and there's an equal spread across the community. We're currently running around about 35,000 rate assessments, and any consideration of a special rate variation would be across all of those. That said, there's a number of processes that we would need to go through. the current one of community engagement is, and this session is part of that engagement process. We then need to revise our planning documents, our long-term financial plan and our other resourcing plans, and put them on public exhibition. So there's another chance for the community to be involved. Council in its meeting towards the end of October will be asked to make a formal statement on whether they would like to submit special rate variation or not. We start talking about service levels. If we wish to put a variation together, that goes to IPART, early IPART, Independent Pricing and Remuneration Tribunal, a independent group from state government who go through rate applications and assess those, obviously on an annual basis. So an application goes into IPART. We then need to put another revised set of our long-term financial, our resourcing plans on public exhibition. So you'll get to see those twice should this be considered the appropriate path to take. And then IPART will go out and put it all on public exhibition again. So I would imagine by the time we get to May next year, when the determination is made, you will have seen the faces on the screen quite a few times. Should we go for a special rate variation? You probably get sick of hearing us going out and talking. We want to hear your views. You only talked to me last month, surely, but nonetheless, we are obligated to do all of that to make sure that we have made a very concerted effort to engage with the community. And then IPART will make their determination early May next year. Two things we're trying to achieve. The first thing, as I've alluded to, is financial sustainability. We've got to get this organisation back into the black. As I said, running deficits for any length of time is not sustainable and is rather a false economy. So we've got to eliminate budget shortfalls. We've got to get the organisation back above zero. And clearly we've got to cover the increase in costs. As I've indicated, every business is going through the same sorts of things. I talked a little bit earlier about a consumer price index running at 5 or 6.2% now, which is all very lovely if you're buying bananas and loaves of bread and cartons of milk. Of course, we don't typically consume a lot of all of that. Our consumption is generally around steel, concrete, fuel, electricity. The indices on those particular things are running anywhere north of 10 to 20% at this point in time. So best case, we get the CPI covered, but we're still going to be a little bit short when we get to our actual construction indices. So we'll need to have a bit of a think about what we do in that space as well. Some of the options that I'm about to present will have additional funds attached to them. Council was keen to put some options out there that provided for some additional funds. And there's a question on the survey towards the end. Should we have additional funds? What would you like to see it spent on? We know from the last 2 years of our engagement that the community values things such as pathways, connections to town centres, for instance. They're very high on maintenance, particularly around foreshores and waterways. I would imagine that they're probably fairly keen on more pothole repairs and road repairs. So that certainly is on the list. Other things that we were asking for some sort of priority list is in terms of natural environment, which is a very all-encompassing statement, public space. The two at the top talks about a grants co-contribution, so whether we should be putting money aside to, in a lot of the grants we were asked to put a co-contribution. Typically we would go to the program of what we were going to do and we'd cut things out of all of that to attract the new grant. Perhaps we should have some money set aside just for that purpose. Or natural disasters. an area of increasing risk for us as an organisation. I'm not going to go into climate change or any sort of whether there's a science attached to it or not. What we are seeing though are more frequent natural disasters. We're just coming off the end of one now. Cost around about 2.5 to 3 million on current estimates. Seems to be going up a little bit more each time I talk about that, but it's around about the $2.5 million. We don't have the money in the budget to pay for that. So something has to give to be able to do those repairs, or we simply wait a little bit longer for the repairs on the natural disasters. Certainly we get some level of reimbursement, but we don't go anywhere near a total reimbursement for those natural disasters. So it's listed there as something that perhaps we'd like to put some funds aside for the times that we encounter those difficulties. Moving on to the options, and there are 5 that I'd like to discuss in some detail. The slide that's in front of you on the left-hand side of the screen, certainly as I look at it, talks about the 2.5% base or the 2.5% rate cap that IPART are telling us is likely to be the rate capping for the next 4 years. So if nothing else happens, we can be somewhat assured that rates will go up 2.5% each and every year for the next 4 years. We're then suggesting a range of 5 options. Option 1 is a steady increase, 7, 8, 9, 10% over 4 years. And I'll go into details on what that will mean in terms of the organisation and our average rate bill. The second option is 10.5% for 3 years. That's the recommendation coming out of the Dollery and Drew report. The third option is put there as a let's just get enough back to get us back into the black and not do anything else. So you can see that's running 11.5, 5.5, 4 and 6. A 1 year option, big number, 1 year, and we get in and we get out 26%. And finally, a steady increase of 9.75 over 4 years, which on the figures, as you'll see, provides for the greatest additional funds coming back into the organisation. Remembering that the numbers that I've talked about, the 7, 8, 9, 10, include the 2.5 on the left-hand side. So I'm not allowed to talk about just the extra. I've got to talk to the community and say the total rate rise is going to be a certain percentage, but understand that of that, 2.5 is more than likely to be coming anyway. So here we go. First one, steady growth. 38.56 is the cumulative effect, as you can see in the top left-hand side. It'll increase, and we're only talking the average residential rate across the LGA, or for those, and I'm going to try and just get this right, for those with their rate notices sitting in front of them, it's the top 2 line items on your rate notice, which talks about something along the lines of a rate ad valorem and a rate base amount. So if you add those 2 numbers, I'm not talking about the impacts on what's the waste or the Hunter Valley catchment levy, it's just those 2 items. Under this scenario, it'll increase by $433 per annum or $9 per week. The graph on the right-hand side, moving through 2023, we are in 2023. Any SRV or special rate variation will only come into effect July 24. This one, with those numbers, you can see the first year in 2024 will still be running at a deficit of 800,000, goes to a surplus of 400 in 2025. 3.2 for the third year and so forth. So broadly speaking, we don't repair the budget for the first 2 years, and we don't get any additional funds, and that's the lighter shaded box that's above the top line. We don't get any additional funds until 2027. So we're not able to put into plan any increase in services or maintenance levels or that type of thing. The average residential rate, we've compared ourselves to our closest neighbouring councils. We do know from the Dollery and Drew report that typically when we benchmarked against 15 other councils, we're around about 30% less than like councils across New South Wales. Under this scenario, you can see we start off, we're still the cheapest in 2023, slowly increasing, and we overtake Cessnock in 2026, and we're still favourably positioned against Maitland, Lake Mac and Newcastle at the end of the SRV period. Option 1, steady growth. Option 2 is the independent recommendation, again coming out of the Dollery and Drew report. 34.92% cumulative over the 3 years, $400 average residential per annum, or $8 per week. Doesn't quite fix the budget in terms of 2024. Yes, there's a surplus of 900,000, which is a whole heap better than being below the line. I'll accept that. We don't have any additional funds coming into the organisation. A little bit in 2025. We start to see the effects in 2026. So if we can wait another 3 or 4 years before we've got additional funds, then that certainly has advantages. As you'd expect, comparisons to our neighbouring councils were still lowest to start off with, and we overtake Cessnock in around 2025. Number 3, short term. This is a 29.68 cumulative increase, $341 per week, beg your pardon, $341 per annum, $7 a week, 11.5, 5.5, 4 and 6. And as you can see, it only just repairs the budget in 2024. That's why we picked those particular numbers. And we're okay through 24, 25, 26, 27, and then we start to slide backwards from 2028. It's fair to say on those numbers and those forecasts and projections that we would most likely be looking at another SRV program 26-27. So it's a very short-term, lower percentages, lower cumulative to the options that we've just talked about. Averages, we're obviously quite a bit lower. We overtake Cessnock in or around late 2026. So it'll go some way to where we need to be. We won't see any additional funds, and service levels as they are at this point will simply be maintained to that particular level for the next few years. The single year, 26%. So first year we go up 26%. Average $298 per year, $6 a week. As you can see, it repairs the budget. First year, 2024. First year, you've got more money into the organisation. You can start to do things that the community have identified in that priority list I talked about a little bit earlier. And we've got some significant numbers there early on so that we can make a bit of a change in terms of being able to get out there and do some extra maintenance. You'd imagine, obviously, we'd overtake Cessnock pretty quick in that particular scenario. Last but by no means least is the longer term option, 45% cumulative, 9.75 for 4 years. So it's a fairly large increase, just short of the double digits, but it's for the 4 years. So it is a fairly significant impact. And as you can see, the cumulative effect is a 45% increase. $518 per annum, $10 per week. At 9.715 for the first year, doesn't quite repair the budget. We don't quite get there in 25. 26, we've got some extra funds available. to provide for those maintenance options or service level increases that I've talked about earlier. So it goes some way to where we would like to be, doesn't get us there in the time frame that perhaps some of the other options provide. Again, we're lowest to start off with, and we overtake Cessnock. Given the size that it's 45%, we're starting to get up closer to the Lake Max and Newcastle's at the end of the SRV timeframe. That said, I've assumed that all the other councils are just going for the rate cap, and they don't have special rate variations in their short-term plans. So they're the options. I've run through that. I've thrown slides and I've thrown numbers around, and I've talked quite a deal in that regard. All of that's obviously on the website. There's a lot of, or I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy for people to reach out and explore some of those as we go through, or certainly after the session. If anyone's got any particular thoughts that they'd like to express, we're happy to hear that. We encourage, obviously, the surveys to be filled out. We've got a web page that's up and running at this point. A lot of information on there, as you would imagine. Rates calculator that we used with the community the first time this morning. So if you know your land value, and you probably do, given that I've sent a rate notice out to you recently, you can go in there and put in your land value, and you can see what your rates are likely to be under each of those options. So a little bit more information about exactly what would happen through each of those options. A number of community sessions. We've done our first face-to-face, and this is our first online this afternoon. We've got a couple of more of those to come next week. Facebook Live has been recorded, again, on our website, and we certainly encourage everyone to get on and do the online survey. Having any difficulty, we're happy to help you go through all of that. We understand that some people like myself aren't particularly tech savvy, so there are people that are available. Just give the council a ring and we'll be able to help you step through all of that. Short-term phases from here. This engagement process is due to wrap up early August. So we'll then be obviously looking at the input, which is why I've encouraged you to get on and do those surveys. It's only from the surveys and the comments that you make that we can assess our discussions with the community and just how people are feeling about the process. And then in September, we'll have to sit down and start a conversation with the council on the path forward. We'll have to have some idea. We'll start to firm up some thoughts about whether we'd like to think about an SRV and whether we need the next round of our integrated planning documents to go out on exhibition. So that's me done for now. I'll take a little break and sit back and have a glass of water. Back to you. Thank you, Janelle.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks. There's a lot of information to take in there. Just for those that have joined us, I just want to, some people have come in through the presentation. So we're just recording this session just to let you know. I didn't want you to be surprised by that, just so we can use this on our website and other channels that people can access just to catch up if they've missed it. There's a couple of questions that have come through. I'll pass these on to you, Tim Crosdale. The first one is, does council recommend a particular option from the ones that we've presented?
Thanks, Janelle, and thanks for the question from the community. At this stage, no, we're not recommending a particular option. As Tim Hazel has gone through, the purpose of presenting them at this point in time is to say that there are a range of options that are available, and they will achieve different things for us as a council and by extension for the community. Certainly, we are looking at those objectives that Tim had run through around fixing the budget. We know that that isn't the only part of it. We have other options there that we will continue to implement around making sure we're tight on how we use those resources to assist us with fixing the budget. But certainly that's a big driver for us should we go through an SRV option. Equally, the ability then to be able to build some resilience into the organisation is really important for us. And then if there was any additional funds, then that would also be something that we could use to increase services to the community, but that's why we need to have that engagement there. So nothing at this stage is locked in. It's a conversation that we would then go back to council.
Okay, great. And the other part of the question is, what's the likelihood of success with IPART following this process? So you might need to give a bit of context around that process again.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Janelle. Good question again. It's obviously something that, as Tim Hazel had worked through, it's a decision from our council to make an application, and it's an application only that will go to IPART. They look at a number of different factors in terms of their criteria, in terms of their assessment, and they do look at things like, are you financially sustainable? It is a key component of that. As we've just heard in that presentation, and also through the independent reports, as we currently sit, no, we don't meet that requirement, as in we're not financially sustainable. So that will be something that IPART will take on board. But then they look at other things around, well, what quantum are you looking for? Are the community aware of what those impacts will be? And also, what would you be using those funds for?
Yeah, and just on that, as part of that process, one of the questions has come through, has the community's capacity to pay been included in the analysis of the options?
Yes, it has. And that through those independent reports that were mentioned through the presentation, there is a particular study that has been done that has independently analysed a capacity to pay from the community with regards to some of those rate options. So yes, that certainly has been done.
Great.
And it's something that will obviously be included as part of any application should council choose to make it.
Yeah, thank you.
Tim, add a little bit, Janelle, just on the question. I think it's very important to understand our demographics of who we've got, what is the community, what's representative. We're looking at our socio-economic disadvantages, obviously. We're looking at our pensioners. We're going through all of those sorts of data collections. A very big part, though, is to talk about hardship provisions and to make sure that we have a really good conversation about putting a safety net, if you like, so that people don't fall through. We understand mortgage stresses, and there are ways of measuring that and doing that sort of stuff. So that'll be all part of the conversation with the council about making sure we do beef up those hardship provisions or policies that we have, just to make sure that we do have that area covered off.
Yeah, great. And Tim Hazel, for you, talking about natural disasters, the question is around, just one sec, let me get it back up, about putting money aside for natural disasters. So are we saying, what we're saying now is that we've never had a fund put aside for that? Can you explain how that's being managed? Yep.
Correct. We don't quite go into panic mode, but we get fairly close to it. Depends on the size of the disaster. The 2021 rain event, where it absolutely bucketed down across the community, I think cost us $4 to $5 million. We're still in the process of trying to fix all of that. The real difficulty is that we are provided with reimbursements, but typically it doesn't come in till 12 to 18 months to 2 years afterwards. So things like the foreshore bridge that was washed out. Okay, well, it took us 12 months to get around to repair all of that. We've only just starting to see the finalisation of being reimbursed for all of that.
Yeah.
Short answer to it all is we've got to stop doing something, or we've got to try and find money from somewhere, robbing Peter to pay Paul, or Mary, as the case may be, and it depends on the size of the disaster. 15 superstorm caused all sorts of troubles in terms of being able to afford that, and we did scramble, and we had to scramble for quite some time. So short answer, no, we don't have any money set aside for rainy days.
Okay, thanks, Tim, that's good. Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll probably just wrap up for today. One of the things I just wanted to make sure, I know we keep mentioning this, but it's super important as part of the overall process. We need you to go online and fill out the survey. It takes around 15 minutes. It's a really good tool to give you a bit more background on the whole process. It's sort of quite interactive. So we encourage you to complete it, and we also need any of your family or friends that you're talking to who have an opinion on it, to get them to get online and complete it. If we haven't answered your questions this afternoon or this evening, we'll certainly come back to you. We can send you a message direct with answers to the questions, but don't forget, on our website, you'll find lots of detail around a lot of these questions that people are asking. So if that's it for tonight, I just want to thank everyone for joining. We've had people drop in and out through the evening, so it's great to have you here. Don't forget to join any of our upcoming engagement sessions, and thanks so much for coming.